Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you. And welcome back to the Go of the Wise Show. I'm your host, Ardian al-Mahdi.
And I'm Hussam al-Mahdi.
I'm Jamil al-Ahmadi.
So on the last episode, we talked and we concluded our whole topic about the door number 11 on the transmigration. Not the transmigration of the soul. That was a previous one, actually. Yeah. It was about the soul family and how the soul family works. We talked about the incarnations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, specifically the 12 Imams and the 12 Mahdis. And my God, it was very interesting. I think the people benefited. I think you guys benefited from it. And it was a wild experience to see how the soul family tree shows the interconnection between the families, between Imam Hussein, Abu Sadiq, Imam Ali, Prophet Muhammad, and the likes thereof, including some of the brilliant and great incarnations that each of these prophets and messengers and imams had. And quite frankly, it really all makes sense. But anyway, without any further ado, let's continue with the next chapter, which is actually door number 12 of the Go of the Wise, titled The Reality of the Crucifixion of Jesus Christ. But before we begin, let's put up the QR code on the screen, so this way you guys have the chance to scan the QR code and download the book for yourself. The book is an amazing book. It is 600 pages plus. And it's got tons of great information, great knowledges you can read along with us. The book is available in English, Spanish, Arabic, French, and a multitude of other languages, and many more to come in the future, inshallah. So, okay, let's start off, and let's start off with the very first slide where we talk about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. In the first slide, where it's titled The Crucifixion of Jesus, what do we find? We find over here that it says here that a man from Cyrene, Simon.
We do have a video for that.
We have a video?
Yes,
okay, perfect. Let's play the video.
Let's go for the first video.
A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it, and they crucified him. Dividing up his clothes, they cast lots to see what each would get. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews."
The fact that Simon of Cyrene is a man there at the scene of the crucifixion, and I mean, it is kind of strange that, he is a noteworthy person in the scene of the crucifixion. And Abu Sadiq, he goes on to explain, he says that Jesus the Messiah made it abundantly clear that no one takes his life from him, but rather he has the ability to lay it down and take it up again. This means that Jesus has control over his soul, and when and how and where he can incarnate. And this is why there's this huge build-up about the chapters of before, talking about the reincarnation, transmigration of the soul, and the soul family, because if this was not explained earlier, probably this whole concept of Jesus incarnating and moving from body to body would be confusing, and it is a heavy matter. There is much debate between Christians and Muslims over the account of the crucifixion. Christians believe that Jesus died on the cross for our sins, while Muslims believe that it was made to look like he died on the cross, but in actuality, he was saved and raised up to God. How exactly was it an illusion, and how he was raised? This is where the Muslims differ, and no one seems to have a precise answer. And some early Christians and some Christians actually believed that Jesus ﷺ was never crucified, and just like Muslims, they believe the crucifixion scene was an illusion. So already we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about, because, and that is the case. Go to any Christian and they'll say that the biggest problem that they have with Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family is, maybe everything can be fine and dandy, but the only problem that they really have with Prophet Muhammad in its essence is this whole thing about the crucifixion of Christ. It's like, how can you guys say, okay, well, it's one thing to say that he's not the Son of God, or that he's not a part of God or whatever, but like now you're completely denying the whole scene of the crucifixion? I mean, that's insanity.
Yeah, and so one of these mysteries, this is one of the mystery between the, as you said, the Christianity and Islam, and even it's a mystery in Islamic circles itself. Like today, I was talking online with some Sunni brothers who actually, like, I mentioned this to them. I mentioned this specifically to them. I was like, all right, well, how many opinions do you think the scholars actually have about this topic? They don't agree. 100% they don't agree. Some say that it was Judas, or like one of his companions who actually betrayed him, who actually went and became like him. Others say like it was just made to look like that because like they actually got fooled by somebody, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turned somebody else into the shape.
Yeah, some even said it was one of the Pharisees, maybe.
Yes. Exactly. So there is no consensus between the scholars exactly about this topic specifically. Which leads to the question is, did the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam not tell them? You know, did he just come and he reveal, hey, Jesus Christ, in fact, was not actually crucified. It was just made to look like that for them, and he stayed quiet. You know, he stayed quiet. Okay. Nobody asked him, for example. I mean, that's just very strange, you know, like that something this big, this magnitude, where the Bible is entirely talking about the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and when this prophet comes in later on and says, no, it was not. It was actually just looking like that to them. So how would it look like that to them? It must have been to the point where they were seeing the person is Jesus. Like they had to have been convinced that it was Jesus, right?
Otherwise they would not have recorded it saying Jesus was crucified.
Exactly. I mean, how can his mother, the people around, all of the people were around watching?
The disciples,
they were watching the body being crucified, and they are thinking that that's Jesus.
Yeah, and I mean, they were freaking out when it was happening. You know, like people would say like, hey, you know, he's being crucified, and then like Simon Peter is denying ever even knowing Jesus. Like, I don't know who you're talking about. I never met that man. And so like he's freaking out. Mother Mary is freaking out. The mother of Jesus is freaking out. Mary Magdalene's freaking out. All of the disciples are freaking out. Judas Iscariot himself believes that it happened, and he killed himself because of it. He hung himself, saying like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I betrayed my own master, my own friend, somebody who I had a 3-year-long adventure with, and then like." Okay, I'm just going to kill myself. Like, what am I going to do? So even Judas Iscariot believed, like, okay, I killed my own master, so he killed himself.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, how can all of these eyewitnesses suddenly be all false? I mean, unless the narrative which the Muslims have, which is that they did not crucify him, nor did they kill him, but it was only made to appear so. So for sure, even for them, it was made to appear so. They genuinely believed that Jesus Christ died. But how? That's a big question, because as you said, some would say maybe it was Judas Iscariot, some would say maybe it was the Pharisees, some might even say, hey, it's like the hologram theory, I suppose, where like, oh, maybe like there was just like a replica of Jesus that like God just suddenly made, and then like that got crucified. But like, what is the reality then?
No, exactly, and this, as you said, the reason why the Golden Rise is structured as it is in the wisdom of Abu Sadiq, obviously he's put the trilogy that we've been speaking about, the knowledge of reincarnation, the soul family, the transmigration of soul, then the soul family, to show obviously that reincarnation is a thing, the transmigration of the soul is a thing, so that you don't have to, die. Your body doesn't have to die for your soul to leave you, or that to take place. And then obviously the soul family, you see the sort of rank of Jesus and how high up he is in the realms of the soul and the sort of the real world. So in this verse here, it says that it's clear that Jesus is the one that no one can take his life from, and he is the one that basically comes and goes as he pleases, right? So with all the knowledge that we put on the table so far of the soul and the matters of the soul, it seems here now that we have a being that is in control of his soul, and that his physical body and his soul, his planet, his soul, that is projected into him are sort of one and the same, and he has these ability to, as he says, comes and go as he pleases. And I think this is one of the great secrets that is obviously only with the Qayyim that can bring this forward and confirm confirm this for you, because as we know, the fitness comes from the scholars and goes back to them, and you can ask any scholar today, and all you're going to get is confusion. No one actually knows.
Yeah, that's true.
But the only person that knows, as we kept saying, over these past few episodes, is the Qaim of the family Muhammad, because this is one of his great proofs, and this is knowledge that only he can come forward and confirm and to clarify for us. So, let's get into the transmigration of the soul of Jesus into where he went next.
Yeah, so it actually says here in the Goal of the Wise, where it says some of the Gnostic Gospels that were rejected by the early church go into details concerning this account, such as the second treatise of the Great Seth from the Nag Hammadi collection. So this collection predated Islam. It was not an invention by Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad was not the first one to talk about a look-alike or an illusionary display of Jesus being crucified. This was something that the early Christians before had already believed in. And even the Gnostic Christians, like the Manichaeans, also believed in that, which we already said Prophet Muhammad himself was a Manichaean. He was a Gnostic Christian before the revelation from Gabriel came. So I guess we can go over the what's written in the Nag Hammadi and the second treatise of the Great Seth, where it says here, and the plan which they devised, now this is what Jesus says, he says, and the plan which they devised about me to release their error and their senselessness, I did not succumb. Now pay attention to that. He himself said, I did not succumb to them as they had planned, but I was not afflicted at all. Those who were there punished me, and I did not die in reality, but in appearance. So over here we already see Jesus confirming that, guys, just as the Quran said, he did not die, nor was he crucified. It was made to appear so. And here we see the same thing being written. And I did not die in reality, but in appearance, lest I be put to shame by them, because these are my kinfolk. Like these are my people. The shame was that the Messiah comes to them, and they kill their own Messiah. I mean, that's shameful.
Absolutely.
I removed the shame from me, and I did not become faint-hearted in the face of what happened to me at their hands. I was about to succumb to fear. As we know, he prayed to God, saying, please pass this cup from me, but do not let my will be done, let your will be done. I mean, over here, he's confirming that that's what took place. And he's saying, yes, that was fear. That is what I was afraid of. And I suffered according to their sight and thought, in order that they may never find any word to speak about them. For my death, which they think happened to them in their error and blindness, since they nailed their man unto their death. So it was somebody from them, that Jesus is saying, somebody from them who was amongst the crowd, somebody from the people who was crucified rather than his own self. And then he says, from there, Anoias did not see me, for they were deaf and blind. But in doing these things, they condemned themselves. Yes, they saw me. They punished me. It was another, their father, who drank the gall and vinegar. It was not I. They struck me with the reed. It was another, Simon, who bore the cross on his shoulder. The very same Simon that we played the clip from the Gospel of Mark, stating that the one who helped Jesus carry the cross, Simon from the father of Alexander, that very same Simon is mentioned here to be the one who took up the cross. He bore the cross on his shoulder. It was another upon whom they placed the crown of thorns. But I was rejoicing in the height over all of the wealth of the archons and the offspring of their error and their empty glory. And I was laughing at their ignorance, and I subjected all their powers. For as I came downward, no one saw me. For I was altering. Now check that out. He says something which is very interesting, right? Because, okay, if the Christians were to say that maybe like Jesus is God, let's say, or like Jesus is the Son of God, well, can't God do all things? Well, over here, Jesus is saying, he said, for I was altering my shapes, changing from form to form. So, is it a physical body that he's just transmigrating into, like he's fixing his face into something else? Or is he changing from body to body?
Exactly.
That would make more sense because we just talked about transmigration of the soul. And therefore, when I was at their gates, I assumed their likeness. So he probably jumped into another body and assumed their likeness and their body. For I passed by them quietly, and I was viewing the places, and I was not afraid nor ashamed. for I was undefiled. And I was speaking with them, mingling with them, through those who are mine, and trampling on those who are harsh to them with zeal, and quenching the flame. And I was doing all these things because of my desire to accomplish what I desired by the will of the Father above. So my God, over here from the Nag Hammadi, we can analyze and see very clearly that it really does match with the canonical gospel in terms of what was going on, because Jesus is talking about, hey, like the scenes that were going on, this happened because of this, I did this because of that. We see that clearly. And he brings up even Simon, who is there at the crucifixion scene, and basically said he was the one who took up the cross. He was the one who they put the crown of thorns on. He was the one who suffered at your guys' hands while I slipped away from you all. So that is something, and it matches with the Quran. It matches the narrative of what Prophet Muhammad was saying. So now, how can any Christian with any dignity who believes that Jesus is the Christ, who believes that Jesus has the power to lay down his life or to take it back up, how can anyone deny this now?
Yeah, no, this is, this text here is phenomenal. And I think only someone that is sort of blind in heart or hard-hearted could just outrightly deny this, because, you know, they attribute godhood to Jesus. But then to say that this is not possible and that he had to die on the cross is ridiculous, even though he says himself that he's the one that lays down and picks up his life. And, you know, this is something that is, as we mentioned, the people, you know, these societies that sort of rule the world, they know this sort of knowledge. And in Hollywood, we have that depiction in The Passion of Christ where Simon of Cyrene comes and helps Jesus carry the cross, right? And you just see Jesus like blow, like he was like, and he just blows, right? There's like this deep breath or sigh into, like, as they're facing each other. And I remember when Abu Sadiq alayhi salam, you know, from his piece in Sweden, was speaking to us about this topic before it came out in Go the Wise. He was saying, like, do you guys know, like, the moment or how Jesus escaped from his body into another body? Because as we knew, he didn't die on the cross, he himself. His body was crucified on the cross, which is why they're confused. But he himself, his essence, what he really is, didn't. That went somewhere else. And he asked us how or why did this happen? And obviously no one really knew. So then he brought up the scene on his phone, and we all watched the scene from The Passion of Christ where he breathes his, what happens is that side I'm talking about is actually him breathing the spirit, his soul, into Simon of Cyrene. And then from then on, he watches the things that happen to his body. And that's exactly what it says here. He just watches them think that they've crucified him, and obviously it wasn't. There was a transmigration of soul happening. He physically, his soul didn't get crucified. He bore some of the punishment, but then changed, right? And then he just kept bouncing, as it said here, changing his form and his appearance from place to place until he literally escaped the crucifixion scene in that area through the different, you know, bodies and beings he took. And
it makes sense, actually, you know, because he himself said in the gospel, he said, they struck me with the reed. It was another Simon who bore the cross. So, like, the scene where Jesus is marching and they're whipping him and he's like carrying his cross, that happened. That was Jesus. But everything else after that, when Simon came into the scene, as you said, that was a moment where when he breathed his last, that breath was actually his soul and consciousness entering into Simon, and then Simon, his soul and his consciousness now jumping into Jesus.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that we need to also like mention, just before this whole event happened, Jesus Christ, when he asked for the cup to be moved away from him, it would be almost like denial from God to actually reject that statement from him, you know? So we cannot we're talking about this event and in the event, because what led to this event is the fact that Jesus Christ did ask for God to move this cup away from him if it was in the will of God. Well, obviously, it was in the will of God, because God's will is to take care of those he loves and trusts, and Jesus Christ is his son, right? According to at least in the son, in the sense of the son, not in the actual physical sense of the son. So the idea is that he is the first. He is a creation of by the hand of God, right? That he's the first. He's one of the Holy Spirits that actually was created by God. So how can he not fulfill a wish for somebody who's like that, you know? So it doesn't make sense. So when Jesus actually asked God to move this cup away from him, and God saw that, his will for sure became, yes, I will. And in there was also another secret where actually God goes and asks other beings around, and so to see who would come and do this sacrifice instead of Jesus himself, instead of the Spirit of Christ. So when we're talking right now, we're talking about Jesus Christ alayhi salatu wasalam walking out of the torture after being denied by everybody. And he collapses. He collapses, and that's where the scene comes in, where Simon of Cyrene out of nowhere pops into the scene. Nobody knew who, like technically speaking, and before this he was almost like a stranger, right? To the general masses. So basically, he comes out and he helps Jesus Christ to carry the cross, and that's where what we're saying is that's where the switch of the souls happened. Then the soul of Simon of Cyrene entered into the body of Jesus Christ, and the soul of Christ entered into the body of Simon of Cyrene, and continuation of the story happened from there. So the main concept is this: is that when you're talking about Jesus Christ and Simon of Cyrene and these events, you have to understand that we have just provided the evidence for you in the Nag Hammadi collection of books, of Gnostic Gospels, that at some point a Christian brother of ours or sister of ours had to write it down, and they had to be so afraid for this data to be lost in history that they placed it somewhere, in a cave to protect it from who? From, for sure, the Council of Nicaea, where they actually outlawed all these things, right? Or at least this is a survival, something that survived from the side effect of something like this, where it was hidden in a cave somewhere in nowhere.
And it was actually a wide belief, by the way. Manichaeism, for example, that was a Christian denomination that actually believed in the crucifixion of Jesus Christ being an illusion. And they actually were competing against Christianity in terms of growth. They actually had large followings. Many Christians back in the day actually believed that the crucifixion of Christ was an illusion. It did not really happen. But the opposing side, the mainstream Christians or the Catholics basically of that time, they opposed the idea Christianity or Catholicism became the basic, mainstream of the religion of the Roman Empire. And all of these teachings, as you said, after 300 years of this being the norms, 300 years later, now they canceled it. They basically said, hey, this is something that we don't want, we don't agree with.
It's a heresy.
It's a heresy. So they labeled it as a heresy, and they left it off the table, and that is why they were burning. They would
kill people. They would kill people. They would actually threaten people with imprisonment. If you are found with any other gospels or than the ones that they've agreed on in the Council of Nicaea and after it, then you would be considered a heretic. And we know back then it wasn't really kind of like peaceful place. It was dark ages at that time. It was very dark. It was so dark that immediately you might be taken, you and your wife and your children, and hung right in the street, in the middle of the street, or burned alive. So the idea is it was a huge disaster that hit Christianity at that time. True Christianity that actually was oppressed in the true way. And so it had to go underground, like we discovered right now. Nag Hammadi Library was like a huge discovery, and it changed quite a lot of the narrative that happened. And Nabi Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam is making it super clear what is going on. And to begin with, when Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used this argument, which is that it was made to look like that for them, and then we discover something like this, and Nabi Sadiq saying that Muhammad was actually a Gnostic Christian at some point, and then you go back to the narrations of Islam and you find that actually when he first believed, he went to Waraqah son of Nawfal, and then he was actually a Christian who confirmed for him this prophecy. It just clicks into the picture, into your mind, all of these scenarios that were vague. Where did the Prophet Muhammad receive his message? Well, what's going on? What was he before? What was actually his religion before? And then you would see that there is a huge connection between these things, and Abu Sadiq made this connection super amazingly clear.
Absolutely. And just on the topic of Manichaeism, it's fascinating because this is a religion that sort of blossomed in between Christianity and Islam, right? And without getting into it too much, because we'll get into it in the later door, but it's fascinating because it really sort of connects the dots between Christianity and Islam and sort of what went on there. But this Nag Hammadi scripture, as you said earlier, ties completely into the narrative of the Quran, right? Because it says here, and for the saying, we have killed the Messiah Jesus, the son of Mary, the messenger of God. In fact, they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but it appeared to them as if they did. Indeed, those who differ about it are in doubt about it, which is obviously clear, and you can see that on the ground today between the Muslims and the Christians. And then from another Ahmadi scripture, the Apocalypse of Peter, it goes a step further and really confirms this Simon of Cyrene being the person that bore the cross and is the one that is punished, because for here it says, "He whom you saw on the tree, glad and laughing, this is the living Jesus. But this one in whose hands and feet they drive the nails in his fleshy parts, this is the substitute being put to shame, the one who came into being in his likeness, but look at him and me." And this is what you were saying, that there's obviously, when he asked for God to take this cup from him, there's a being that, puts his hand up and says, "I will do that for him." Exactly. And again, going back to the previous episodes, we mentioned who this person was, right? In the last episode, in the last episode, the Soul Family, where we're given examples of incarnations of these beings. So it's clear, and without that, then it sort of doesn't paint a picture. But obviously, Absalek in his wisdom comes forward and says he is the person that is the one that is crucified.
The angel Metatron, in fact, it's like where or Nunrael or
Simon of Cyrene, basically.
Exactly, that was the spirit that was inside of Simon of Cyrene. It was the angel, and it was an angelic soul that actually decided to make the sacrifice on the cross instead of Jesus Christ himself.
Yeah, and this is why in the previous episode we mentioned that one of the incarnations of Abu Sadiq, when we go back to page 162, we mentioned the lookalike of Jesus, and we said, hey, that's something we're going to be talking about in the next episode. So what you're reading right now, this whole thing about Simon of Cyrene, Simon of Cyrene, the soul that was in him that got switched and went into the body of Jesus, this is why Abu Sadiq became the lookalike of Jesus, because he took over the body of Jesus and was crucified in his place. And if you were to ask Abu Sadiq if he remembers this, I mean, there's a whole now section here that is titled, "I remember it, I know it." And it was amazing hearing Abu Sadiq's story and how he figured it out and confirmed it with Ahmed al-Hassan was amazing. And he even brought up scripture that further confirms it. He says, I was speaking to the Imam one day, and I brought up the second treatise of Great Seth, where it says, I visited a bodily dwelling. I cast out the one who was in it first, and I went in. And the whole multitude of the archons became troubled, and the matter of the and all the matters of the archons, as well as all the begotten powers of the earth, were shaken when it saw the likeness of the image, since it was mixed. So over here, Jesus is confirming that I entered into someone else's body, and the likeness of the image freaked out the archons. They did not understand what does it mean. And the archons are basically like these evil, heavenly beings, or like these evil astral beings that apparently rule the world according to the Gnostics. So he's saying that, the evildoers like Satan and all these guys, they were confused as to what the heck's going on. Why is that, there's a likeness now, there's a big switch that happened, but now we can't do anything. They already took the guy, now they're crucifying the wrong guy. And I am the one who was in it, not resembling him who was in it first. For he was an earthly man, but I am from above the heavens. I did not refuse them even to be a Christ, but I did not reveal myself to them in the love which was coming forth from me. I revealed that I am a stranger to the regions below. And then he said, these are the words of Jesus in one of the Gospels of the Nag Hammadi. In that Bible people read today, it is written that when Jesus returned and Mary Magdalene saw him for the first time, she thought that he was simply a gardener and did not recognize him. And she asked him to point her towards the body that was there. And the proof behind that, now people might be thinking like, hey, what are you talking about? That makes no sense. She was just a woman who was crying. She did not see him, and she just mistook him for the gardener, but actually it was Jesus. But actually, if you go back and actually read what it says, and that's in John chapter 20, verses 14 to 18, if you want to read it, if you didn't download the book and you don't want to download the book because you're a Christian and who thinks that this is heretical, at least read along with us the Gospel of John chapter 20, verses 14 to 18. What does it say? At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. So she saw him. She said, at this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. But she did not realize that it was Jesus. Now, this is a woman who was deeply in love with Jesus. She would not miss Jesus. Like, even if you threw him into like a crowd of people, she would be able to point him out and recognize him. She saw her Lord, she saw her everything get crucified. How is it then that she looks at him and does not recognize him, and she's mourning him? That makes no sense. Because for sure, my God, I mean, if any of our parents were to die, and then the next day, as we're crying and mourning, if we saw someone who looked like them, we would freak out and say, what, is that him? You know, so how can she just look and see Jesus and then go back to the morning and not recognize him?
Imagine then if it was the case that Jesus Christ in his body, after he was like beaten and all this, and she's obviously like, you know, they try to make it sound like he had the holes in his hand and everything like that. Well, how is it that she looked at him and she came back to normal weeping? She would have seen this man who was standing in front of her, completely bruised up, right? Completely, his face is bulging. The last thing you would do is you would look at the person and go like, start going back. You would like, what is, you know, what is this? What is this scenario that I'm just entered into? Like, I just opened my eyes and the same beaten person, you know?
For sure.
And
This is one of these things that, you know, scholars or priests or whatever you turn to in Christianity have no answer for. They just make up sort of, you know, explanations off the cuff, saying, no, it wasn't this, it was
they twist the whole scene.
They say the best explanation is that she was crying, so she couldn't see.
But they have no basis for these arguments.
Let's pretend now. Let's pretend that, okay, maybe, because it's not mentioned here that she was crying so much to the point that she couldn't see, because it says that she looked at him, she saw him. But let's say, okay, maybe her eyes were very watery, so it was very blurry, she couldn't see him. But now here's the next thing. If you heard the voice of someone who you love, if you heard the voice of your friend, your husband, your mother, your father, you would recognize that voice. You know, I mean, you're not crying from your ears.
Exactly.
So, you know, but what does it say here? It says, he asked her, woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you are looking for? So she heard him. And it says, thinking that he was the gardener, she said, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him. So over here, why would she think he's the gardener? If you're a gardener, for sure you must have a certain attire that makes you appear as a gardener, because she said, it says here, thinking he was a gardener. Why would she think he's a gardener unless he looks like a gardener? Unless then he inserted himself in the body of the gardener who was facilitating the gardening of the tomb that he was meant to be buried in.
Just like it said in the Gnostic text, where he's basically changing his form, bouncing from body to body, because, you know, now that we've covered the, you know, the goal of the wise and the reincarnation, transmigration of souls chapters, this is really the only explanation that makes sense.
It is.
Like you wouldn't think it's a gardener if you wouldn't not recognize Jesus if he came down from a cross, even if it's a week, you know, like it wasn't. Even if it was a week, you'd still see him bloodied and battered. You still see him having wounds, pretty much wearing the same clothes, you know, the same height, same stature. But obviously he'd be just like, you know, beaten up, you know, he'd be injured.
Like mangled up.
Exactly, but he wouldn't look like a gardener. No. You wouldn't think that's a gardener.
So the last thing, you looked at him and you see, at least, how did she look at him?
Exactly.
Like, you know, like very quick, and his quick glance, you know, how did it...
And she didn't recognize his voice?
She must have seen, she saw him and she heard his voice.
Exactly.
And she then still continued to think that he's a gardener.
Exactly.
You know, then after a while, when he told her something, when he told her her name...
When he sort of reveals himself.
Exactly, when he says, Mary, she was like, the gardener? I don't know him. He doesn't know me. Who's this?
No, but like she freaked out as soon as like Jesus said the next word, which is, he says, Mary. Boom, bro. It's like, then she says in Aramaic, Rabboni. She cries out, she says, teacher. So she recognized that this gardener does not know me. This guy for sure does not know who I am, does not know my name. It's kind of like, have you seen the movie, have you seen the series Chosen?
Yeah.
You know, there's a scene in this series, I'm not sure if you've seen it, Jamil, but me and Hussam, we watched it. Have you seen it?
I've seen like half of it so far. I don't know if I got to
so in like the first episode, like the way that Mary kind of like also recognizes Jesus or that he's the Messiah is like, Jesus calls her by her real name, Mary, right? And she freaks out. He's like, well, no one's called me that in years. Over here, the same thing kind of happens. It's like, she recognizes that the gardener must be the Christ, must be the soul of Jesus. Why? Because only Jesus would know my name. The gardener doesn't know my name. It's like I'm nobody to the gardener. But he calls out and says
exactly
Mary.
the same almost. Like if you think about it, like it's when he tells her straight up by her name, and she's like shocked.
Yeah, she's taken aback.
She's taken aback. It's the same scenario here, where he calls her. She sees him. She's talking to him, and she doesn't know him at that time in the beginning. She doesn't know him. She doesn't know who's this man. He's just a random man popped into her life, and he's just talking strangely to her. It's the same scenario exactly. It's the same scenario, just in a different way. It's subhanAllah. It's like it really is a synchronistic way.
Yeah, no, and then let's continue, because my God, there's a lot to go over in this episode. So Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her. Then the Imam replies to Abu Sadiq and says, yes, basically this happened, right? And then he said, and in another gospel, in another Gnostic gospel, it states, and I subjected all their powers, for as I came downwards, no one saw me. For I was altering my shapes, changing from form to form, just as it was said in the other Gnostic gospel we read. And therefore, when I was at their gates, I assumed their likeness. For I passed by them quietly, and I was viewing the places, and I was not afraid nor ashamed, for I was not defiled. And I was speaking with them, mingling with them through those who are mine, and trampling on those who are harsh to them with zeal and quenching the fire. And I was doing all these things because of my desire to accomplish what I desired by the will of the Father above, something that we just read previously. But now he asks the important question. He says, did Jesus, peace be upon him, enter into a body and then jump to another body and then to another body? Meaning his soul went from one body to another. So basically, he's asking the question, did Jesus not just enter into the body of Simon of Cyrene, but did he jump into multiple bodies in order to escape the crucifixion scene and do as he pleased?
Yeah.
The Imam said, yes, my son, and this is what happened without a shadow of a doubt. So now we have the Imam confirming that the reason why the crucifixion scene was an illusion was because someone swapped bodies, and now this person who is Jesus is now jumping from body to body to body. And also he says, trampling on those who are harsh to them with zeal. Basically, some of these bodies that he went into, when he leaves them, they end up dying. So like he trampled over them. It's like he destroyed that house. He would destroy that vessel that he entered upon leaving. As if he was like some sort of bulldozer, like a spiritual bulldozer upon a person's body.
Imagine if he just leaves, and then the person just like is like thinking that he's now Christ, you know, because he has the Christ in him now, and he's thinking, okay, I must be Jesus, you know, because he's spoken, he must have like something, you know, or even if they weren't, like Jesus Christ was obviously cleaned up afterward.
Yeah,
he's moving from one body to another body, which they can't leave evidence.
Yeah, no, there's no evidence to leave behind, because they're dead.
Yes, exactly.
They're not alive anymore.
Yeah.
But now check this out, right? It says here, I asked, then the soul of the lookalike entered into Jesus, and actually I do have to say something too, that if those people who were, the generals and those who hated Jesus, I mean, the moment that this transmigration scene happens and then they return back to their bodies, they're going to for sure know, okay, something's up, like something super freaky, like supernatural is happening. Now you expose Jesus' plan.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's why they, like these bodies now expired, because Jesus had to trample over them.
Yeah, and plus we know that, like, we'll get to the topic of that there are bodies out there that don't have spirits in them, that don't have bodies, that don't have like a soul in it, and they're empty houses. And we'll get to that.
We'll get to that later.
Episode, yes.
But anyway, let's continue. So then Abu Sa'id confirms, and he says, then the soul of the lookalike entered into Jesus' body, and this occurred at the moment when Simon of Cyrene approached Jesus and lifted his cross. So then the Imam said, okay, what do you say? So he said, I say that Jesus, peace be upon him, said, if anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Yeah. And no one took up his cross from the disciples. Only one man took up the cross of Jesus in one famous incident. When Simon of Cyrene approached Jesus in order to help him, he took up Jesus' cross, and this was the moment in which Jesus escaped and entered into Simon, and from Simon to another body, and then another, and then yet another, until he escaped. I feel it, I remember it, I know it. So Abu Sadiq, he remembered what happened, and he just went to his father to tell him what he remembered, and the Imam confirmed. He confirmed. He was so happy for Abu Sadiq, because Ahmad al-Hasan, from him his peace, is his father. He started clapping his hands and he said, "Great job, my son! Great job, great job." I mean, that's beautiful to see. It's beautiful to see that we have a living Imam that can tell us why it was that the Christians became confused, why it is that the Christians hold on to the narratives that they do today and the understanding that they do today concerning what happened with Mary Magdalene and the gardener, concerning the crucifixion scene, and concerning Simon of Cyrene. Now we have a full understanding of what really took place, and because we simplified it for you while reading John 20, I'm pretty sure you guys can agree with that. I mean, how can a woman who loves her master so much like not see that it's him and not even hear his voice and like analyze that it's the same person, unless it's a new body with a new different vocal cords and sound and speech, right?
Exactly. It's true. And there's something that also happens later on in the Bible where two more disciples of Christ, not the companions, not the 12 disciples, but the companions of the larger community of Jesus, they also talking about Jesus, saying that they're unhappy with the situation and what happened with the apparent crucifixion of Jesus, and then he approaches them too, and the similar thing happens, and they take a moment to recognize, oh, this is Jesus, because he's not in the body of Jesus, he's not in the body of God, he's in another body another time, and the same sort of scenario happens. And I don't understand how, with knowing everything that we've spoken today about in this episode, the words of Jesus himself, that they can deny that these things happen or come up with any other excuse or argument, because there really is only one truth, and that's the truth that Abu Sadiq Islam has brought forward. And I think it makes sense, and it's sort of just for Jesus to have this ability to just jump from body to body and push out the souls that are in there, or jump into bodies that have no souls, because we've mentioned in these earlier episodes that obviously the soul is not something that you own, it's not like you, it's not something that you're born with, it's something that you're given, or maybe not given in that instance, so you're just there in that moment, and God just makes it that way that you can escape from soul to soul when you're at the rank of Jesus, who we know now is like Al-Kisar, right? We mentioned this. He's the angel Gabriel, and he asked God to enter the cloak with him, with Prophet Muhammad, and the five that were there, the four that were there, and you see his rank now, and you see that he has the ability, as he says, to pick up and put down his life as he chooses and pleases, and he's in effect laughing at these people that think that they've crucified him, and mocking these agents of Satan that crucified the Messiah that came to them to lead them, but instead they crucified him in the apparent, and they were happy and glad with that, but really he's the one that gets the laugh. And this is the, fruition of the, verses that say God is the best of planners, because, they think they crucified him, but they didn't.
And they got plots and God's
so, for me, this is crystal clear. Like, there is no other explanation for what happened in the time of Jesus and the crucifixion.
And we have evidence for it. That's the top up for it, is that what is the basis for the opinions of these scholars is their opinion. And it's not actually anywhere to be found in any books and stuff like that. But we actually have evidence in books, in historical narrative, that was written by people who are of the ancient times, and news that came to us hidden like treasure, that was unlocked for us by God and given into us in this special time that we're alive in today. I think it's like an important reminder to remember that like the large Ahmadi library has opened a huge different way of interpreting the narrative that we have struggled with for the past 1,400 to 2,000 years. Now there's a huge new movement that is happening on the ground, and it's growing on every single daily basis. The Ahmadi religion of peace and light is changing actually the dynamic of conversation around these topics on a daily basis, and we see the effects of that happening on the ground today, and you'll see it happening around your houses and around your towns soon.
Thank you, Hussam. And with that, we will end the show for today, and we will be joining you on the next episode, where we continue on the journey of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, or the appearance of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and the narratives that followed up after. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you on the next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.